Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us here at the 1947 Partition Archive. Given the critical situation that South Asia is facing right now with the COVID-19 crisis, we are adding some new programming to our channel to answer your questions about the crisis. Today's topic will be about mental well being through this tumultuous period and when to get help. My name is Vikrant, and I'm volunteering to bring you this episode. Joining me is Miss Vasantha Peter.
Hello,
Hi,
Vikrant.
Vasantha.
Good
Thank you
morning.
so much for your time. Good morning. Good morning. So,
Thank you.
Miss Vasantha is a counseling psychologist with over 7 years of experience of empowering, sorry about that, individuals across varied sectors, including schools, hospitals, corporates, and NGOs. Miss Peter facilitates workshops, training for students, teachers, and parents on various psychological issues. Presently, Vasantha is working as a project manager at a pregnancy helpline in India, practicing individual counseling, and is involved with teaching and training young mental health professionals. So, again, thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am.
Thank you
Uh,
so much for having me.
Great.
It's a
To
great
start,
day, great way to start Monday, the week forward.
true,
Hopefully,
true
it's
that.
going to be a
Yeah.
better week for the ones who have hoping for it to be a good week.
Yes, yes. That is ultimate goal. To start off, I'd like to channel our thoughts towards anxiety. It's an age-old ailment, right? Why then is it causing such a severe adjustment disorder amongst us as a community and as a country now?
Yes, Vikrant. Now, Vikrant, before I could answer that, I just want us to briefly talk about fear and anxiety. Now, we all understand fear. You might be driving on the road, and all of a sudden, you see this vehicle right at you. You could be a great driver, but the minute you might see this heavy loaded vehicle, there is a fear that grips your heart, and that's normal. You get over it, you come out of it. But what about this anxiety? Now, this whole thing of anxiety is you're constantly anticipating a threat, something is going to happen. Now, this kind of an anticipation, whether it's fear or worry or stress, has always been part of a normal life. Now, imagine a young person who has to appear for an exam. He's anxious whether he's able to answer all the questions. Or imagine a young bride or a groom preparing for their wedding day. They're going to be anxious about the life before them and the commitment they're going to make today and all that's going to change. And probably the anxiety a pregnant woman is experiencing the day before she is going to give birth. What's the labor, the entire experience of being in the laborhood. So anxiety has always been part of our life, which is actually good. Hopefully it helps us to be prepared in better ways. Now, however, what's different about this pandemic? Now, the biggest thing is that this is new. Why do we say this is new? Now, well, pandemic is just not a medical phenomena. Okay, there's a virus, and then we have to deal with it, but it's affecting the individual, the society, and causing disruption in every aspect of our lives. And that's something that we never knew. For example, if the anxiety an individual was experiencing or a family member was experiencing, it was very restricted to themselves or to the family context. But here is a pandemic that's affecting our entire system at large. And therefore, the most important thing is that no one has been through it. Like, I'm sure when a young person is writing exam, as parents, as teachers, we are constantly telling them, come on, you're going to do well, things are going to get well, and they speak from their experience. But during this pandemic, there are no stories of experiences. There are no stories of someone who's been through it and has come out victorious. Everyone from the age of, say, zero, a child who's going to be born or he's in prenatal, to a person who's old, lived the longest, for everyone, this pandemic is new. We don't know how to cope. We don't have the relapses that we have are falling apart. And the most important thing that we all could think about is that when we were in our anxious, our day-to-day struggles of anxiety, we had coping mechanism. Probably we took a walk, we went to our neighbor's house, we had those chats with our friends, we partied, we enjoyed life, or found healthy ways to cope with it. But now our coping mechanism that was so familiar to us, that we knew how to handle stress even in a marital conflict. Say you had a conflict with your spouse and you walked out. It was easy to come back with a different mindset to come back and talk about it. But here is a pandemic that's taken away all our coping mechanism. And therefore, it's difficult. Therefore,
Mm.
it's causing so much of um, problem among everyone.
Right, right. That's actually a really good point that you've touched upon, ma'am, because I do remember reading in a journal that the human mind looks for patterns in
Mhm.
everything that it does. Okay, so just for a beginner like myself, I'm not a mental health professional, but for a beginner like myself, in layman's words, what you're saying is that because there's no pattern here to identify to for anyone, it's that particular issue that's causing disruption in our local and further away ecosystem, and that's what's messing up everyone's thought pattern, right?
True, true.
You also touched upon something super important, that there are no good experiences coming out of it. For example, you spoke about commitment issues, you spoke about stress, you spoke about fear, you spoke about uh, women who are going through labor or going to go through labor. There are always good stories, experiences that they've heard of, things they can read. But in this case, there's more negative thought and negative news being promoted out there than the positive. So, would you suggest that people actually take an active effort into Googling or YouTubing good news stories to get themselves out of this anxiety? Would that work?
Okay. The most important, yes, that's good. That's good. And I would always say that be well informed. I will not say that get out of the Google or get out of the social media, but look for that one reliable source of information that you
Hmm.
can trust.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. Uh, um, in terms of reliability, right, and this pattern thing that we discussed, something that's going on for decades and decades is that final year college students and 12th grade students in India have always relied on graduating and starting this new part of their life, right? That's how we are brought up. Everyone says you finish 12th grade, you go to college, you get independence, you know what to do with your life, or at least you get on this path of knowing what to do with your life. But now there's no specific direction for these kids, right? They're lost because no official body is telling them exactly what's going to happen due to the issue we just touched upon in the previous question, right? And this causes, apart from being in a really awkward, lost situation, they're also in an age group, especially the 12th graders. They're in a very, you know, uh, young adult, full of hormone kind of age group where their teenage angst is adding to their issues. What would you advise them to do at this point?
Right. So, Vikrant, one thing we all understand and know that every age group has been going through some kind of a loss, and the biggest loss are the students as a big, because they almost did not have school for more than 1.5 year, or in fact more than, it's going to be close to 2 years.
Yeah.
And imagine these 12th standard kids who have had these big plans of not only choosing a career, but a big plans of how do we do farewells. For adolescents, where friendship are the most important thing, I just don't get to see them again. I don't get to probably sit in a class and have those fun moments. So they're being deprived not just of education in itself, but the entire social life of being with peers, from schools, from teachers, the atmosphere, the environment, it's losses after losses. And it's not a one day event, it's been an ongoing thing. And on topping of it, the sad part is the uncertainty of how will our education system unfold. The biggest challenge and one of the protection that probably I think the health system and the government are working towards is to make sure somehow our children are safer, because we do not understand to what extent could it cause harm, and therefore they decided let's keep them safe in their homes. But in the process of keeping them safe in the homes, the education systems cannot make a general announcement saying that we are good, because there have been cases when the schools have opened up, exam centers have opened up, that children have been inflicted with the virus. And what do we do next? I'm answerable to the parent. I'm answerable as an institution for the well-being of our society. You know what I mean? So therefore, what's happening is that they have taken a stand to say, I'm going to protect my children. Now, what's happening with the 12th standard students is that they cannot accept that I am not going to go to school anymore. So the
Mm.
first step of this would be, even for parents and for the young people, to talk about the acceptance that this process of, or this whole thing of staying at home, being safe, is for their common good. It can change over days, over months, but that's the first point. And the second thing is that our education system hopefully will bounce back. If it's not today, it could be after 3 months, where they will open up those colleges and make their courses available, whatever that is, whatever that needs to be done. So what I would suggest, one most important thing is, do what you know. Could be
Okay.
studies, could be indulging in recreational activities, to continue to be hopeful of getting into the college that you like, preparing for the entrance exam, with not having a definite cap on this is when it's going to be. Having said that, on the flip side, I would encourage all the young people, please do not use the negative coping mechanisms. Indulging could be in substance, indulging in overtly being involved in the social media, indulging in spreading gossips, indulging in anything, could be alcohol, substance abuse, gambling, online gaming, video gaming, getting into online relationship. All these stories is in no way going to help you cope better. So what I would recommend, two things is that acceptance and do what you know right now. And the second thing is find healthier ways to cope.
Okay.
Have those regular hours of doing whatever you are doing, you know do, the routines are very, very important.
All right. Understood. That's actually really good advice for everyone. I'm going to keep that in mind. Uh, all right. Let's move on to a little older age group immediately after college. You've graduated, right? And there's this insane sense of what am I going to do now? That was pre-COVID. I remember just like a few years ago, 5, 6 years ago, I was in that situation. But now, because of the COVID crisis, there's this job insecurity that's very valid, right?
True.
And the youth have spent a lot of money and time on getting educated. Uh, this causes, from I would say, from anxiety to depression. There's a huge spectrum, right? And what would your advice to them be?
Right. So, right. I think the anxiety or the feeling of helplessness, I don't know what to expect, I don't know where to go, I don't know what's going to come my way, is some of the real emotions that every young person is going. Unemployment, financial instability, uh, Possibly people who are looking forward to going abroad to study. I mean, you're doing altogether a career choices, a changing of profession. There were so many big plans that these young people are making. I would say during this season to hold on. Why do I use the word hold on? One, because again, like I said, we do not know what's going to open up. There's a lot of aid coming from outside the country. There are organizations within country that are working towards creating jobs for the for the young graduates. There is a microfinancing company. So there are things happening underground, behind the scenes, where there are systems working to ensure that there can be jobs that can be created, which probably you and I do not understand in depth. Having said that, I would say if you do not have a job right now, think about investing time in developing your skills, doing some online courses, look about certifications, look about interacting with people from the professional industry, get talk to them. You know, if you're from accounts, talk to people who have been in accounts, ask them what the scenario is going to be like. Getting those real statistics can also build your hope, knowing that everything is not falling apart. And I would say find now sources like LinkedIn, sources like you, social media. Get those platform where people are talking about it. So it's not like one company says, "Hey, there are no jobs. I'm going to lay off." That's one part of the truth. And I would say widen your understanding to know exactly what and all is happening, so that you don't base your hope on one aspect, but you get a holistic picture of what's happening.
Right, right.
And hopefully, with your new attained skill set, you can find an alternative job.
Great. So, just to, summarize what you've said, yes, things are not as they were before, but there are certain systems in play right now that are ensuring that employment and things of such nature do happen, even if they don't happen exactly like they used to before, even if it's, remote work and work from home. There are
True.
things happening, but
Yes.
you can't control those. What you can control is developing your resume, upgrading your skills, so
True.
that when this opportunity is made available to you, you are best prepared and the number one candidate for it, right? Because that's something
Or
you can control. The rest of it you
yes.
can't,
True.
right? That
True.
that's what you're
Vikrant.
saying. Okay, great. I want to move towards the generation that made us all, right? The elderly. We haven't spoken about them till now, but something that's been troubling me and a lot of our viewers is that uh, due to large amounts of time spent inside homes, right? Because the elderly are very vulnerable to this virus. They spend a lot of time inside their homes trying to protect themselves. Their children tell them to stay there. Uh, Great. Physically, it might help them not catch the virus, but mentally, staying indoors, it's this captive kind of feeling, and it surely causes some kind of loss of hope. I've seen it happen to family members, right? What can they do?
Right. Vikrant, I always say this in the process of uh, ensuring that our elderly survives. You're actually, we are in the process of taking away their very living. You understand what I mean?
Yes,
Right? By ensuring that they are home, taking away their movement, the physical movement. And if you know that our elderlies have always been people who are involved in something. They've never sat back like us and scrolled through those messages and enjoyed a piece of information. They were
yeah,
on the move.
yeah,
And here we are asking them to restrict.
yeah,
The most thing they enjoyed is the conversations they had with their neighbors. And here
right,
we are telling them, hey, stay at home. You don't need those conversations. Why don't you adapt to the email system, phone, social media, and all, in the process of ensuring that they survive through this pandemic. But what's
Right.
happening to them, like rightly you pointed, there is so much of irritation. You can see these elderly shouting, and some of my neighbors, both my neighbors are elderly couple and their children live abroad, so I know what it is like. And some of them having those uh, trouble with sleep patterns, habits, emotional outbursts, not enjoying eating, not enjoying everyday life. I remember one of the elderly couple, not in my neighborhood, but otherwise, who said that maybe I should die alone, die earlier.
Right.
Have instead of having to go through all of these are so real to them. But if we can remember this, that what we are taking from them is the activities to be involved. And what we need to ensure is to, so if you're telling them don't talk to anyone, then be the person who is going to be involved in talking to them. And if you're telling them like you're distancing them from having conversations with neighbors, then take time to be with them. And of course, a few things that you all could enjoy. What do an elderly love? A community life, people of togetherness. Imagine you are in a room, there's an elderly person who hates technology and cannot get a hang of it, and there are a bunch of people, and all of them are constantly scrolling. So, how
Right.
about keep your gadgets aside and spend time? Talk about stories. They enjoy talking stories. So,
Yeah.
having that liveliness, talking about stories, keeping them informed about what's happening. Maybe they don't know what's happening in the news. Constantly assuring them that this is for their good, and setting up like a regular routine. And one more thing we are doing is to deprive them of their routines. Like if they like to help in the kitchen, maybe they can make, they might not be making a great meal, but allow them to do. If they love gardening, let them be. Take time out to be in the sunlight. I always say this. Do not keep them confined in the house. Sunlight is very important. The vitamin D is good for the mental health. So please make sure that we are doing them. And in case of quarantine, it's always that regular contact through phones, through mostly through phones. And I would definitely like to add that do not rub your guilt conscious on them, saying that I cannot take care of you, and from outside supervise them not what to do, what not to do. I would rather encourage you to say what can they do with the limited restrictions,
I understand. So
to be
it
more
shouldn't be.
reasonable with them.
I get it. It shouldn't be a jailer prisoner kind of relationship, right? They need to understand what's happening is for their own good. Uh, find suitable substitutes to their regular activities, right? Like as you said, spend more time with them. So don't just give them the problem of you cannot go talk to somebody else. Solve the problem by being the person that they're getting to talk to, right? Great. Another thing was to set up a routine, which is very good. That's something I'm going to do with my grandparents as well. Outdoor time. If you can't get outdoor time, then something that's super important is regular contact through the phone or in real life. That's brilliant. It's very heartwarming. And yes, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for that. Um, let's move on. This is an experiential question. It's happened to a friend of mine, and from what I've read online through accounts, right, of people on not just on Facebook, but even on LinkedIn, right, because people asking for help everywhere. Uh, there's a friend of mine whose parents both were COVID positive. They were admitted to the hospital. They didn't have their phones. It was just them. He couldn't visit them. All right. So he's at home. He's COVID positive, but he's asymptomatic. So they've sent him home. His parents both have, pre-existing conditions that make them vulnerable to the disease. He gets an update once every 12 hours. That is a situation that, you know, I hope nobody else has to be in because it's your life givers in that terrible, terrible situation that you're just hearing bad news about and you have no idea how to handle it. So, what do you advise to people like this who are home alone, constantly waiting for updates, fearing that the worst has happened and they don't know about it yet?
True. Ha, Vikrant, coping with any kind of a loss, and in this case, I see the loss of physical connection, the loss. You're physically not around for the one you want to be around. It's very, very difficult having to deal with those anxiety causing questions like, are my parents going to make it through? When am I going to see? Will I be able to do? So many questions. And I think in India, we have seen those images that talk about what it is going to be like. So, having said that, Vikrant, I think the most important thing is that in, the home quarantine is for 12 weeks, 2 weeks, right? So it's the 2 weeks that we need to make it through, telling ourselves the 2 weeks. And the second thing is that, which means that these 2 weeks are the toughest time, but this is the time you raise a support system for yourself. How about having your friends or someone take care of him, or wait, if it is possible. I don't know if hospitals allow them, but to check on them, to give them that constant assurance that they will make it through. I don't know what is the reality, Vikrant, whether they're going to really make it through or not. But I believe that if you as an individual could reach out for your friends for comfort and support, that will give you strength to be
Mm.
hopefully not only make it through the season of 12 weeks of quarantine, but hopefully whatever adversities that might come after that. And this will be a great time to just reflect on all that they have been, all that their parents have done for them and supported them, those creating positive thoughts about what's been happening rather than focusing on the worst that could happen.
Okay,
That's
so
very important here.
thankfulness, right? Don't alienate yourself from people and don't internalize the worst possible thoughts.
Yeah.
Rather, motivate yourself to believe that only good things can happen from here because it's that 2 week period that you need to get through, right?
Yes, yes. And this will be the time, connect with people, reach out, just take up the call and say, hey, can we just have a talk? Sometimes just watch a movie together. Your
Right.
friend is watching on the other end. You can watch here, watch film, do activities, exercises together, just planning up so that you stay mentally fit.
But Vasanta, a lot goes with that, right? When you're in that kind of state of mind, picking up the phone and calling someone, first thing is like, okay, am I being a burden on this person?
Right,
Second is, what is he going to say? He's going to ask me the normal nonsense, or she's going to say the normal thing that, oh, everything will be fine, and this and that. And you already assume that this is what's going to happen in the conversation. You're already bored with it. You already know that this isn't something that you want to hear, right? Because
right,
you're making the worst assumptions possible.
right.
Just getting out of
What?
that mindset to take that first step that you're talking about is so difficult, right? So how do we get there, just to that first step?
So, Vikrant, I will take the phone and I will tell the bestest of my friend, let's not talk about my parents. Let's not talk about anything that's going to happen. Can we just talk about something that's not COVID and this? So, if you make those clear that I just don't want to dwell on that, but can we please talk about something that might be of interest to you? And that is very important. So you tell what you want to hear. If you don't want to hear the negative part, you can always tell your friends, can we stop dwelling on those questions? I don't want to talk about it. And
Mm-hmm.
this is not just for the ones who are going through any kind of a loss or in quarantine. I would suggest this to everyone, that if there are a topic that's very unsettling and constantly you feel they're bombarding with the negative feeds from what's happening in our country, or those images that you're seeing, or the news, I would say tell your friends, I don't want to talk about it. And if they insist they want to talk about it, you have all the rights to walk away from that place or hang up the
Right,
phone.
right, right, right. So don't dwell on the worst, right? Is what you're saying. Don't dwell on
Yeah,
the worst and make your need known. Because if you
very
don't
true.
make your need known, people aren't psychics, right? They're not going to know. The first thing they're going to want to talk about is your issue, and empathy is great, but it's also very difficult.
True.
So it might be tough for them to just assume that this isn't something you want to talk about. You're so right. Yes. Okay. So dictating the direction of the conversation is super important. Yeah. That's
Right. Right.
actually, before I asked you the question, it seemed so difficult, but now that you've given us the route, it seems like the most obvious answer. You're right. Yeah. Okay.
True. And Vikrant, just to add to that, we need to understand the context we live in, the communities that we live in. For us to give advice is very easy. Even if you're not going through the words, it comes to us naturally. And in
Right.
always a respectful way to decline it. It's okay. Because what matters right now is me. So do
Okay.
you want me to repeat that? So, what I was saying is that in the community and the context we live, people around us are always bombarding us with advices. What you need to do, what you don't have to do. Hey, get over it. It's gonna be all right. Talks like these, and you can always tell them either you acknowledge what I'm going through, or let's not please talk about it because I'm not ready for it.
That's food for thought. Yeah. Yeah. Rather than talking about the wrong thing, I might as well not talk about it at all until I'm ready. Yeah.
Yeah,
You're right. Okay. Uh, all right. Given this specific topic, I'd like to take it a step further, right, onto the ultimate sadness that a partner or a parent or a child or anyone who's close to you can get. Uh, it's the news of death, right? And dealing with it. I know you said that it's very complicated for each individual, it's unique. But could you give us a few pointers on how to start to heal? A
yeah.
generalized look, if you can.
Sure. So, Vikrant, first thing is to understand that the responses or the reaction for grief. It's normal to feel shocked. It's normal to be in the disbelief. It's normal to deny it. I cannot accept that I have lost someone I love, to be in that anxiety, to be in those stress, to be angry, to be sad for a long period of time, to have don't feel like eating, you have loss of appetite, you have loss of sleep, to be in that state of I don't feel like doing anything. Why? Your loved one is not there, dear. it, he or she meant a lot to me. So if you're experiencing these emotions, I would say as a family members, it's okay to go through all these emotions. Why? Because we need to express our loss for our own better mental wellness. Now the question is, if as a family you have experienced a loss, what do I do? After through this process, again grieving is different. If a child is there, how does a child grieve versus an adult, a partner, a parent, a grandparent? We don't know. So everyone have a different responses of grieving, and give them the space. We cannot just open the door and say stop crying as if he's going to come back. No, please cry. It's so
Right.
painful, it's so painful. Let them express it. Having said that, what are the things we can do as a family? Maybe say it's been over 2 weeks now. I'm not putting a cap and saying that, oh, in 2 weeks they'll be all right. But I'm saying that so that it doesn't get worse. Within a time of 2 to 3 weeks, start celebrating the life of your loved ones, talking about the memories, the good times you had with them. You can also talk about few rituals, new things you start, maybe a photo, write a photo, do a photo album celebrating, just celebrating their life. And the most important thing is connect to people who might just be your listeners. Get the support system. For example, you as a family don't feel like cooking, ask your neighbors, is it okay if you make a meal for me or your loved one, so that as a grieving family you feel supported by the community. That's quite heartwarming when you see so much of comfort being poured out during that time. And for you as a family, it also gives you strength. to start accepting and start moving on. And I would also say that connect with your larger community, whoever that looks like, and just talking about it. The more we try hard to shut down our feelings, the more it becomes difficult for us to accept, and the longer it's going to take for an individual to heal from the loss. If the family earning member has passed away, then what can as community, it like your friend, your immediate friend, what kind of a support can we give? It's not that we are going to make her completely dependent on us for a longer time. It's just that she needs that immediate. Maybe it's just scaffolding during those season, and then I'm sure they might find ways to move forward.
That's that's actually a really good analogy, Doctor. Mr. Santa, the scaffolding that you used. I I actually I know I told you this was the last question, but I actually wanted to ask you about in your professional experience, right? What are the stages of dealing with this ultimate form of grief? How does it go exactly? Because
Mhm.
it's different for everyone, but there must in your profession there must be a stage by stage analysis that's done, right? So what is it like?
Right. So usually, the first stage is understood to be as shock and denial.
Right.
Okay. Now, shock and denial of something that's happened, and then it could move on to pain, anger, and bargaining, saying that I can't accept what's happening, and you show anger maybe at God, maybe at your system, maybe people, doctors who have let you down, the health system that has let you down, probably your loved ones who did not act immediately when something has happened. There is a possibility even to just go into depression because of all these that's happening. But definitely there comes to a stage where an individual begins to bargaining, which means that okay, I'm ready to accept what's happening in terms of what I understand. And again, there is going to be a stage where there is acceptance and hope when an individual can move. Again, Vikrant, this is for me to say that it doesn't happen in this definite stages like I have mentioned. There can always be an overlap.
Okay. And do you think family members, right? So there's family member A, B, C, and they've lost D. Okay. Do you think A, B, and C can be going through shock and denial, anger, pain, bargaining, acceptance, and hope differently at different times? Or is it because they're living together and they've gone through the same pain, they will go through each stage together as well? How, or,
Right. So, first thing is we need to understand is that how prepared are they? Like, if a person is going through the illness for 2 weeks, somewhere we have been talking about the doctors have given us reports, what can happen, what cannot happen. So, you're mentally kind of prepared, not accepted it, but you're prepared. But the shock and anger comes in, or the shock part, denial part comes in when it's all of a sudden.
right.
And again, there is a age factor to it, saying that if it's an older couple, probably your acceptance is much more better because they've lived their life and this is the ultimate truth. Versus a young person, again there are other factors, the young person and how significant they were in the family, earning member, the one who had decision making. And again, in that young person, say if it's a father, how closely they are attached to each other, the relationship, again that matters a lot. I could be in the same family, we are four children, then I'm very close to my father but not be very close to my mother. So my response to my loss of my father might be different to the response of my loss to my mother. So therefore, the grief process in itself can be different for different individual. But definitely what ties them together is the fact that we all are experiencing loss. and acknowledging that everyone's expression of loss can be different, that's very important.
Right. Um, that's a very detailed explanation. Thank you for that, Vasantha. Anachal would like to ask us a question. She says, how to cope with numbness, even if it's the death of your closest one.
Right. I would first say that the numbness again is for a period. That's called as shock, or or disbelief that something happens. If you are in that stage of grief, you will move forward with the right social support. But again, monitor how long you're in that shock and denial. You're just like, I don't want to accept it. Especially, say you're suddenly taken aback with someone's death and say, I don't want to go to their funeral, I don't want to see this happening. I would encourage a good support system to help them to journey through this. uh, Cope with numbness, you will move to the next stage, where the minute you start talking about accepting the loss of the of 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 what has happened, you will surely come to a stage where it's no more numbness, but it's about constant bargaining of it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, yes, it does. Um, a thought comes to mind when you speak about bargaining and moving out of numbness and then the next step. I feel like if your support system is not ready to deal with this kind of ultimate truth in the right way, you can go down the wrong path
True.
and start using as a support system those things you mentioned earlier, right? Substances, alcohol, other coping mechanisms. It is a very dark time for people, right? And to be able to define what's good for you is very difficult, right? uh, is there a way? Of course, preparedness is key, right? But if it is a shock, sudden death, like you said, how does one make sure that they are taking the correct steps to move on and not just any steps forward that they are made available? Because the easiest way is usually the way that uh, sets you on the wrong path in the long run, right? So
Right. Vikrant, imagine yourself being in a tunnel and the only
right,
thing you can see is darkness. That's pain.
that's
When
pain.
that's pain,
Okay.
meaning that it's so dark and it's so real, and you cannot see light, and you just have to blind. It feels as though I'm just every day is so difficult to make it through, and therefore it becomes very very important that we have an external person supporting us or watching over us. In case of children, I would say it's the parents who need to see or monitor what the children are indulging in. If it's a spouse, I would say it's the responsibility of a spouse to support, or a friend or a neighbor. Reason being that, Vikrant, it's not easy that I'm going through so much of pain. Let me monitor myself. Our brain doesn't work that way. When we are emotionally charged, our thinking ability just shuts down, and it's normal and natural. And that's why I think in this pandemic, the call to support, the call to watch out, the call to, for the young people who have lost a job, maybe that's my loss, but I can support someone else going through a different kind of a loss. Networking with others, watching out for your own neighbors, this becomes very very important. And hopefully, that the loss can, the journey of loss is never easy if you're walking alone, and you need someone to come alongside of you to monitor so that you don't use the negative coping mechanisms to get out of it.
Okay. Understood. One last question, Vasantha, and this is from me to you, right? Because it's an issue that I'm currently trying to fight off, right? I have noticed in myself and through some of our viewers and reading online as well that even perceived loss immediately uh, manifests itself as logic disappearing from your mind. You perceive loss and logic disappears. Suddenly, you're just so emotional, right? And you said emotionally charged, and that's what brought up this question in my mind. How is it that, see, we go to work, we perform at work, we're super professional no matter what happens. But in our personal lives, the smallest thing occurs, and the lack of logic, it surprises me. Hindsight 2020, right? So how do we avoid this going forward? Like, is there a way to avoid it, or is this is just the way the human mind reacts?
Okay. I would use the word called intentionality, Vikrant,
Okay.
uh, which means that an individual needs to be intentional about having routines in place. You're going to work, what's your recreational activity? If you love music, let the music be playing in the background. Anything that you enjoy, let it make sure that you will be able to engage with that. Like I said, recreational activity. So, physical exercises apart from your work, any other routine, sleep, and all of that, that becomes very important. But one more few more things. When there are times when you feel you're hit, like you said, like perceived loss, there is something called as a grounding technique. Probably it's very simple. All you need to do is to sit down in a chair, inquire how you're feeling and thinking. You can have a book right in front of you. Write down your feelings. I'm scared of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and my thoughts surrounding that is this.
I'm sorry,
So
what did you call this, Vasanta?
it's called as
Grounding?
grounding technique. Ground, G R O
Grounding
U.
technique. Okay,
Yeah.
please go on.
So,
Yeah.
right. So, whenever you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, you can, again, I use a word called intentionality. So, have a chair or something where you sit down there when you're feeling, having these feelings and these thoughts, put them down. While you're doing that, get in touch with your breathing and your body. That is called more like doing a reality check and coming in touch with the reality of what is around you and refocusing on your surrounding. Probably you have a dog in your house and it's barking, the birds outside, the air, the colors in your house. Just meditate on what's around you. So what this does to you, so you awaken your sensory organ, your sight, your sound, your smell, your taste, your touch, whatever it is. Once you're able to do that, you're quickly bringing back your focus from perceived threat to what we call it as like a reality check, and then you continue. It's
Okay.
normal to have these periods more than once or twice. We all have it. Health professionals have it. We have it. Whoever it is, we all have it. That's why acknowledging it becomes easy. And when I put them down on my book, and when I get time the next day, probably I'll take the book and see, okay, this thought led me to thinking that this is what is going to happen. I'm going to be intentional about not allowing it to occur to me again. Or
Okay.
when it does occur, what can I do differently?
Okay.
Sometimes to deal with those perceived thoughts, have those coloring book. Take colors, just scribble, write, express your anger, your disappointments, your frustration. Put them on the book. Might look maddening, but get it out of your system.
Okay. Understood. And that's it for our session for today, Ms. Vasantha. Thank you so much for your time. Your insight is gold. It's so valuable, right? And we really do appreciate it. In the future, if we have any more questions, we look forward to having you here again.
Thank you so much, Vikram. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. For all our viewers, we will be hosting episodes on numerous topics related to COVID several times a week at 9 a.m. India time. same as usual. Please follow us on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube to catch all the episodes. Thank you and stay safe.